everyone, Lexi here, and hello to my fellow fanfic connoisseurs, and anyone in the general fandom, or just now getting into it, welcome! Today I'm voicing over a scrumptious fanfic in Transformers fandom, specifically in the Bayverse section, Klikbait, Julian's adventure in the Terminator Badlands. Written by our lovely author, Little Rue Ruby, whose other works I greatly enjoy, so I recommend please go and check them out in the description down below, as I will put the links down there. Along with, if you want to read ahead or just read along, go ahead and click those. I will probably be voicing more of their stories at a later date, so please subscribe just to make sure you tune in. Without further ado, let's get into it. Chapter 1. Julian gets chucked into a random world with no fucking idea of what he's even supposed to do. But hey, at least he can turn into a Terminator car thing, even though he apparently has permanent Heelys. It could be worse. Welcome, honored user, to your very own drumroll, please. Julian groaned as he raised his hand to rub his eyes, thinking, God, I wish you'd shut the fuck up already. Transmigration! Oh, user, aren't you excited? No, he thought viciously as his brain screamed at him. Now, don't be such a Debbie Downer, user. As per upper management's policy, my only task is to assign you a new designation and assist you with integrating yourself into this world. Once you've gotten the basics down, you'll be on your own. Please make wise decisions, user. Download commence. Error! Julian waited and waited. After a few minutes, he cleared his throat and began to look around uncomfortably, only to startle at the sudden very loud ding! User designation unknown. File unknown. World unknown. Mission redacted. The system wishes the user the best of luck. Julian began to say as he raised his finger up into the void. I don't think. He then screamed as he suddenly felt the ground open up beneath him, and he plummeted down until crash! Son of a bitch, that fucking hurt! He hissed as he rolled himself over to figure out what the fuck he just landed on. He squinted at the utterly trashed Lamborghini underneath him and winced. Ooh, sorry, nameless stranger, your car is totally dead, bro. And then something caused attention. The something in question being his legs, as he swung them around to hop off the car. Oh my god, what the fuck happened to my legs? He lifted one up as far as he could, staring in horror at all the metal and cables, and God forbid, were those fucking Heelys? What the fuck? What the actual fuck? Hey, I heard something over there.
Hello? Is someone here?
Julian rolled his head around and quickly launched himself off the Lamborghini, making a dive for the hedges with a series of loud clangs, metallic screeches, and muttered curses as the figures rounded the corner, the lights catching on the completely fucked up car. What the hell happened to the car? Did someone fucking smash into it?
Oh shit, dude, isn't that your brother's car? He's gonna freak.
Sorry, nameless brother, Julian thought, lighting a candle for the man in his heart. I get you a new car, but I'm broke as shit. He glanced down at his very much not human self and cringed. And I'd probably get shot at, or whatever people did to big Heely wearing Terminator fucks. Man, I'm so not over the Heelys. Like, why of all things, Heelys? He wanted a refund. Where the fuck is that goddamn system? Crap, I do not want to tell him someone did a hit and run. I'll just let him find out on his own. Come on, dude, let's get the fuck out of here. Julian listened as the two boys ran away before letting out a breath of air, yelping when steam hissed out of him instead. God, this is so fucking weird. He awkwardly shuffled out of the hedges, feeling the way tiny leaves and sticks got stuck in his crevices. He then felt something catch against whatever was jutting out of his shoulders, and he shuddered through the feeling until he was back in the middle of the street. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Julian hurriedly brushed off whatever debris he could reach, wincing at the soft sound of metal scraping against metal. He pouted down at his sharp claws. After a moment, he held them out with a growing smirk. He struck a pose, placed one hand on his hip before blowing on his imaginary nails, and said in a shitty Valley Girl accent, "Oh my god, like, so over your shit, Veronica." He cackled, his nerves from before easing back into something more manageable as he looked around the area he landed in. It looked like some high-class neighborhood. Shiny sports car dotted every driveway, and every house straight out of some HOA magazine. He could make out a goddamn ocean in the distance. Bitch, am I in California? Ew. He feigned gagging. Right, time to get the fuck out of here before someone shoots me. Julian peered around carefully before beginning to haul ass down the street, cursing at the extremely loud and incredibly noisy clanking and clanging his body made the entire time. Why can't I be less fucking off that? Before he can even finish that thought, he felt a violent wave of vertigo, and his perception of everything changed. Fucking shit was that? His body revved. Julian paused. His body revved again. Ayo? Something clicked in his mind, and soon realized what had happened. Oh my god, I'm a fucking car, let's go! Feeling incredibly giddy, Julian revved his engines as loud as possible, not caring about waking the entire neighborhood of stuck-up rich prices, because, fuck yeah, he was a car now! The once darkened windows of all the possible HOA homes began to flicker on, and he could make out the faint sounds of old women shrieking at their husbands to go and deal with him. Headlights flashed on at their maximum intensity as he drove off, his tires screeching as he floored it. Let's put on some fucking tunes, he crowed as he felt something click into place as his radio sputtered to life, croning out the Beatles. Classic, but I need something with a bit more oomph. The radio switched through various channels before setting on a loud, blaring cacophony of electric guitars and screaming vocals. That works! With noise playing on high blast, Julian drove until the neighborhood became specks in the distance. Now to figure out what the fuck I'm even supposed to do. Julian snorted awake and looked around groggily. Or tried to at any rate. He remembered that he was a car now. Because that was the thing in this world. Still weird and still not over the Heelys. Or at least it makes some sense. He had driven the entire night until he found an abandoned gas station where he parked his ass and immediately knocked out. Who knew being a Heely-wearing Terminator car thing could be so damn exhausting? Heh, get it? Exhausting? Julian giggled to himself before realizing that he was being so fucking stupid and stopped that shit right in its tracks. God damn it! He sighed. Man, I'm losing my shit, aren't I? Julian had passed a few billboards that confirmed that he was, in fact, in Los Angeles of all places. Though, thankfully, he managed to drive into the direction of the more rural areas, and didn't have to worry about some crackhead ripping off his doors and slashing his tires. Land of opportunity, my flat ass. Anyway, since he was in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, he decided to practice switching between Terminator and car, wanting to see how the fuck the physics of such a thing even worked. All right, Julian said out loud, and he flapped his doors and wiggled his rearview mirrors. Terminator form, go! And absolutely nothing happened. Fuck. For nearly an hour, Julian tried fruitlessly to mimic every Sailor Moon transformation sequence he'd ever seen on YouTube, before switching over to My Little Pony catchphrases, before finally giving in and pretending he was Iron Man. Now he stared down at his body underneath the light of the fat-ass sun in the sky, and realized he looked really, man, I'm ugly as shit, bro. He complained, squinting at his great armor of his arms and legs, tipped with black hands and feet. He twisted a body as such as he could and oohed and awed at the sight of the spikes that poked out of his back. And, oh-ho! Are those my tires? How the hell did they... What? He turned back into a car, and, yeah, no, he still didn't understand how the fuck that worked. Whatever, he was so cool. Julian startled when his vision suddenly began receiving warning messages, or what he thought were warning messages, considering they were flashing red and made concerning noises. He didn't understand any of the symbols, though, so yeah. What a shitty time to be illiterate, he thought to himself as he stared at the messages blankly until he minimized into the top left of his hood, eyes, or whatever was going on, and said, wow, if only some fuck-up hadn't gone off to who knows where, I'd probably have an idea of what goddamn shit I'm supposed to do with this mess. Said fuck-up did not deign to make an appearance, and so Julian was left to figure out how to get rid of the annoying alerts. His stomach growled. Oh. he said, enlightened. I'm fucking hungry. Man, he was so good at being a Terminator. Actually, what the fuck am I supposed to eat? Chapter 2. Julian steals shit and causes crisis, as one does. After a good deal of trial and error involving shoving rocks into his mouth and stealing unsuspecting people's DoorDash orders, Julian realized that since he was a Terminator car thing, that maybe, just maybe, he had to consume the things that cars did. And so he found himself role-playing a normal car while a dead-inside attendant stared into his tinted windows with eyes that looked like they were carrying the weight of the universe itself. Sir, I need you to pay first. Nah. Sir, you asked me to fill up your gas for you. I'm gonna at least need you to pay with credit if you don't have any cash. Sounds like a skill issue to me. Just get good, bruh. Sir, if you refuse to pay and if you refuse to leave, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to call the police. Ugh, fine. I'll leave. Julian grumbled and revved his engines. He rolled out of the gas station and parked himself behind a nearby convenience store with a despondent sigh. What's a Terminator gotta do to get some goddamn food around here? He moped for a while before he realized something. He was parked right next to a fuel truck, his driver nowhere to be found. And conveniently, there was a trash bin that could definitely hold a few gallons of fuel sitting right beside the store. Julian grinned. My prayers are answered. There is a Terminator god. He wound up back at the abandoned gas station with a few gallons of smelly gasoline and had to psych himself up to what he was going to do next. Come on, Julian, he hissed at himself, bouncing up and down on his feet as he paced with the gasoline in his hands. It's just like medicine, only it's gas and it might actually fucking kill you. His method of psyching himself needed work. He decided when the thought made him set the gasoline down before squatting nearly a mile away to scream it at the dirt. An hour later, he dragged himself back to the gasoline when warning messages began to overlap on top of one another until he couldn't see jack shit. Fuck it, if I die from the gasoline, then I die from the gas. The alternative is fucking death anyway, so win, or something. He raised the gasoline up and downed it like a shot, and waited. The screaming warnings went away one by one, and he didn't feel like he was about to throw up or explode. So, yay! Julian took his time drinking the rest of the gasoline and smacked his metal lips when he was done. He nodded to himself. Yeah, tastes like shit. The food crisis now resolved, he wondered what the fuck he needed to do next. Was he supposed to piss and shit at some point? Could he even do that? He looked down at his pelvic area and poked where he assumed his crotch would be and accidentally removed a cap he hadn't noticed was there, and watched in horror as clear liquid sprayed out of the hole. Oh god, what the fuck is the lid? He reached down and tried to stem the flow with his hands and looked around frantically, cringing at the feeling of robot juices completely soaking his hand. Ew, 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 ew. He spotted it a few yards away, snatched it up, and hammered it back into his thick crotch thing. Good news, the leak has stopped. Bad news, he was now in pain. Probably shouldn't have done that so hard, he thought serenely as white-hot agony pulsed out of his snot crotch. I may not have a dick, but clearly something down there is still sensitive as hell. He slowly sunk down onto the ground and curled himself up into the fetal position with a whimper. After fucking himself up and eventually recovering from it, Julian waited until it was dark before he decided to go exploring. Sitting around doing nothing except drawing dicks in the dirt with his claws could only do so much for him. Which is how he found himself being chased down by 4 police cruisers and a helicopter. Fuck off! He shouted, nearly swerved into another car that beeped at him. Julian, not when outdone, blared his own horn in response. Fuck you too! Pull over right now, one of the officers demanded, and Julian's weird brain HUD thing cheerfully told him that the bitches were aiming their guns at him. Oh, hell nah! Fucking shit! He sped up desperately, hoping to be out of range for when they eventually started firing on him. Come on, it was one old lady. She's not gonna die from being hit by a car. Grandmas are resilient, trust me, I know. If you don't stop, we will use force. A warning shot fired, and Julian cursed. And then he yelped when the officer he hadn't even noticed suddenly launched a spike strip out in front of him. Fuck this shit. Completely forgetting about his earlier reluctance to show himself to regular people, he turned back into his Terminator form and landed on his feet right above the little bastard, who stared up at him in horror. "Yeah, not so rough now, are you, buddy?" He reached down and grabbed the dude, who began to kick and scream hysterically. "Alright, tell your bros to back the fuck up and stop with the stars. Man, I got places to see and gasoline to steal." "Stop, stop!" the man screamed at the others. "Let this thing go, I don't want to die!" Julian waited, drumming his fingers on the other hand of his legs as the officers slowly moved away, and by slowly, they fucking inched backwards over the course of the next couple minutes before he let out an annoyed sigh. "Man, this is taking way too fucking long. I hope you know how to fly, my dude." He raised the screaming officer up and yeeted the poor fucker at the others, who also screamed at the sight of the flying man, before he turned back into a car and sped off. Police cruisers did not give chase. The helicopter had long since flown off to refuel or some shit. Julian didn't know the specifics. Anyway, what mattered is that he got away with running over a grandma and didn't even have to face the consequences. "God, I'm just too good at this," he said proudly as he drove further away from the clusterfuck behind him. A few hours and a series of fuel truck vandalisms later, Julian found himself staring down an entire military space worth of guns, trucks, and tanks. A woman stood at the front of the lineup with a megaphone. She raised it up to her mouth. "You will comply with us, machine!" The words shot out of Julian's mouth without a second thought. "What do I get if I do?" She seemed to hesitate and look around at the others, who began to murmur with one another uncertainly. She turned back and said, "You'll get to live." To prove her point, several of the tank's muzzles and turrets raised the lock onto him. Julian nodded sagely and folded his hands underneath his chin. I see. Well, in that case..." He pulled out some gasoline which he stored inside his chest, which was a pretty interesting feature to discover, by the way, and definitely did not completely freak the shit out of him. Nope. And gulped it down before wiping his mouth and tossed the bin to the side with a burp. "Okay, I'm good now," he said cheerfully, and then he slammed his fist against his chest, and he felt a familiar, but still weird click in his brain that made the fun stuff happen. "Better hope you don't shoot," Julian told the megaphone lady as she and the rest of the army backed the fuck up when his mouth began to glow and get progressively hotter and hotter. "I've been drinking gasoline for a solid fucking day now. I'm pretty sure I'll just nuke the place if I die." "Hold your fire!" the woman screamed, waving her arms frantically at the army. "This one's got a death wish!" Julian watched them move back even further, but at least they had stopped aiming the weapon at his face. He let out another burp, but this time it was accompanied by a small spout of guttering flames, and he smacked his hand against his chest once more. With another click, the hot feeling dispersed, and he addressed the pale-faced megaphone lady as if nothing happened. "So, what did you even come here to do? What was the plan? 'Cause let me tell you, that was a shit plan." The lady scowled up at him. "We require cooperation, machine. We know others like yourself. Come with us quietly and we'll take you to them." Julian hummed consideringly. "I mean, I would, but the whole..." He gestured with his metal arm to the tanks and guns. "That doesn't really scream, we come in peace, you know? In fact, I feel a little threatened." "You ran over a citizen and threw a police officer into oncoming traffic," the megaphone lady deadpanned. Julian shrugged. Semantics. Personally, he thought the little shit deserved it. He completely forgot about the grandma, though. He stretched his arms above his head with a yawn. "Well, if that was all you wanted to tell me, then you can fuck off now. I want to go get some grub and pass out in a lake somewhere. It feels like I got dirt up my ass." "Fire the EMP now!" the megaphone lady suddenly shouted. "Fire the what?" Julian managed before, clanged into his head with the speed of a motherfucking bullet, and he stumbled backwards, already reaching up to grab whatever the hell was thrown at him, and his vision went black. His last thought before he went under was, "This is why I fucking hate California." Chapter 3. Julian wakes up, socializes, and realizes that Terminators can get heartburn. Waking up felt like a bitch slap to the face when Julian realized that his brain HUD was filled up with more unreadable alerts, and these ones had fucking paragraphs. He let out a miserable groan. "I literally just figured out how to feed myself. Now you want me to do more?" "Help me," he said. "I've fallen and I fucked myself up. Where's my life alert?" Something new flashed across his vision, and he opened his eyes to squint at the massive wall of blue text and said, "Oh, never mind, I think I found it."
"So you're not offline after all?"
said a guttural voice directly into his brain. What's her designation and affiliation? Julian blinked up at the metal ceiling above his head. Oh, a new voice in my head, as if the one before wasn't enough. I will not repeat myself again, proto form. Did this motherfucker call him a robot slur? You first, Julian snapped, struggling against the restraints tying him down before realizing that his whole body was frozen in place. Ah, that would explain the alerts, I guess. Jeez, haven't you heard of stranger danger? If the voice in his head could snarl in frustration, then Julian is pretty sure this one managed to achieve it. Heh, got him. I am Lord Megatron, leader of the Decepticons. Now state your designation and affiliation. Julian frantically thought about what to say because he couldn't just tell Megatron voice what his real name was. It was too fucking lame. Random bullshit, go! I'm Klickbait with a K, Julian said gravely. I'm an Earth Terminator. Nailed it. Klikbait, Megatron rumbled, and Julian fought to keep a straight face but could only help the coughing snickers that managed to escape him. Thankfully, Megatron didn't seem to notice. Did these disgusting organics create you? Nah, I fell from the sky, dude, Julian said and began to wiggle back and forth, feeling the way the ice around him began to crack and crumble enough for him to move his arm. And let me tell you, falling hurts. Man, I do not recommend it like ever. With one arm free, Julian began to smash his fist into the other arm until the ice cracked away from the other one as well. Plus, these fuckers shot me with a goddamn roofie at my head. If I see that megaphone bitch again, I'll squish her. Limbs successfully freed, he pounded his chest and grinned at the click and familiar heat that ignited inside him, ice running in steaming rivulets across the ground. Distantly, he could make out the sound of the alarm going off as he stepped off the platform and even heard the familiar screeching of megaphone bitch. Oh, I'm so going to throw you off the cliff, just you wait. It appears that your escape has not gone unnoticed. Klickbait. Free me and I'll destroy them all, Megatron offered, and Julian was petty enough to agree because that would be pretty fucking awesome to see. And then he considered the implications that Megatron was not, in fact, just a random voice in his head. He shrugged. I drink gasoline and I can light myself on fire. It tracks. Julian said, all right, I'm down. So, where the fuck even are you, Meg? He crouched to look under a tiny desk and squinted at the cowering scientist that was hiding there. This you, bro? He reached over and poked the scientist, who screamed and fell over in a dead faint. Probably not. You insult me with your ignorance. Turn around, you fool! Megatron thundered. Julian abandoned the now unconscious scientist and turned around. He stared wide-eyed at the towering, frozen form of an even bigger Terminator and said, yo, you look sick as hell. And to be fair, Megatron did look cool. God damn it, not again, all tall and edgy and angry looking, even as an ice cube. Julian tottered over and raised his arm to knock against one of the bigger Terminator's frozen legs, and blinked in confusion when he caught sight of his noticeably skinnier arm. Huh? What the hell happened to my arm? What happened to my body? Julian spun in circles, staring down at himself in horror. Sure, he was ugly as sin before, but now? Oh my god, he wailed, reaching out to cover his face. I'm naked! His spikes, his armor, it's all gone! His thoughts flew back to Megaphone bitch and he snarled, forget squishing that bitch! I'm gonna tie her to a fucking tree and throw her into the fucking ocean! And then he registered the fact that his heelys were gone. Oh, well, I guess I can skip tying her to the tree. Focus, you imbecile! The organics are nearly here! Oh, right. My bad, dude, Julian said, and darted back over to Megatron. One spicy boy coming up. He thumped his chest and looked between himself and the massive Terminator and shrugged. Taking a deep breath, Julian let the heat bubble up out of his chest and into his throat. The MBE-2 is in contact with the MBE-1. Stop it now! The megaphone bitch screamed, and he blew out a massive gout of flames at Megatron's torso, the ice cracking and melting almost instantly. Megatron's eyes, once dark, flickered to life like two red, glowing embers of rage filled with bloodlust. And with a vicious snarl, he lurched forward and tore apart the machinery around him before he turned his gaze onto Julian, who was jumping up and down like a kid who just ate the entire candy store worth of sugar. Your assistance will be greatly rewarded, Klickbait, Megatron boomed, his real voice somehow even more deafening than when he was speaking directly into Julian's brain. Now witness the power of Megatron! Julian watched as the other Terminator kicked out his leg, and a motherfucking rocket shot out of his foot, zooming across the room and exploding against the machinery on the other side. The explosion sending people flying and screaming down onto the ground, where they smashed onto the floor in a gory display of blood and viscera. Another rocket shot out with the same result. And then he watched in awe as Megatron's arm turned into a cannon, which he used to blast at an approaching mob of people that had their own tiny guns. They did not stand a chance. Julian looked down at his skinny arm and pouted. I want a cannon too. You! A familiar voice screamed at him, and Julian turned to see the megaphone bitch standing at the platform with her own gun pointed towards him. You ruined years of my life's work! He stared at her. Okay. I'm going to destroy you! She shrieked and began to shoot at him. Julian glanced back at where Megatron was happily stomping on the floor with his blood-covered foot and reached out and picked up Megaphone Bitch, barely registering the sting of her bullets as he lifted her up to his face. Hey, he said, are we near an ocean by chance? She glared at him, face red. Yes, we are. Why? Do you plan on escaping? Do you really think that my people will let you leave this place alive? She began to laugh, even as Julian began to walk out of the tunnel leading out of the chamber they were currently in, though it also led to a series of corridors and a fuck ton of other rooms he couldn't help but explore. One of the rooms, to his utter bewilderment, had a massive Rubik's Cube sitting in the middle of it. The megaphone bitch in his hand was screeching to him about how her boss would find him and tear him apart for scrap as he raised a single claw to poke at the thing. He felt a pulse from the cube, and then a click from inside his chest. And for a second he wondered if he accidentally activated a bomb or something. Though, when nothing happened after a few minutes, except for a barely noticeable warmth that bloomed in his chest, he shrugged and continued to look for a way out. It's probably just Terminator heartburn or some shit, he muttered to himself after a weird burning pulse came from his chest. Wonder if the alerts are telling me how to resolve it. Hey, lady, do robots take something for heartburn? He readjusted his grip on Megaphone Bitch when she started biting his fingers. Jesus! Chill the fuck out. It was just a goddamn question. After spending a little more time looking around, he found an area where a bunch of people were making a beeline into another tunnel, and guessed that was where the exit was at. Sure enough, he found himself stepping out into the open, and he grinned brightly at the sight of the beautiful, sparkling sea before him. Fuck yeah! He raised Megaphone Bitch high up into the air. He began to struggle violently when she realized exactly what he planned to do. Wait, no! Bye, Felicia! Julian crowed as he flung her towards the sea. He raised a hand to cover his eyes from the sun's glare and squinted as her figure became a distant speck over the water before vanishing into the depths beyond. Good riddance. I hope you get eaten by a shark, he thought with a smirk, turning when he heard the sound of a massive engine behind him and gaped when he realized it was some sort of high-tech jet that flew up into the air before it shifted and turned into Megatron, who landed majestically on the ground in front of him. Whoa, Julian whispered, eyes practically sparkling. I want to be just like him. Now for your reward, the looming Terminator said before reaching over to grab Julian by the neck. He went easily and blinked into the other's red eyes curiously. Was he about to get choked out? Would that even work? The thought was interesting enough to let him continue being manhandled. Megatron stared at him for a moment, his eyes practically burning holes into his armless body, before he released a low, reverberating chuckle, and then he dropped him back onto the ground with a thunk. Julian stumbled a bit before righting himself and asked, So, what's my reward, Meg? Be grateful, Klickbait. You get to keep your spark, Megatron said, turning away, and Julian noticed the smaller version of the weird Rubik's Cube thing from earlier in his other hand. Most others would not be so lucky. My what now? Julian asked. The Megatron was already turning back into a jet and flown away. Hey! And he's gone. Shit! And I got nothing for it either. Damn it! I wanted to ask if I could turn into a jet too. Oh well. The burning in his chest flared for an instant, making him wince with a muttered curse, before the pain died away just as quickly. Julian rubbed his hand over it in bemusement. Guess the heartburn is gone now. He glanced around before letting out a considering hum. After a moment, he picked a random direction and began walking. Thank God it's dark out, Julian thought, or this would have made for a really awkward jailbreak. Chapter 4. Julian reforms a drug addict and discovers the joys of parenthood. It took an embarrassingly long time for Julian to realize that he couldn't turn into a car after he broke out of the Terminator prison, which, given his lack of everything, made sense in retrospect. Still, he really misses being able to turn into something with wheels. Please, he begged, hands folded in prayer where he sat kneeled in front of the motorcycle that he'd snatched up from a nearby theater parking lot. Let me be able to drive around again. The walking is actually going to kill me. I won't even complain about the fucking Heelys, promise. The motorcycle didn't respond, and Julian buried his face into his hands with a muffled sob. Give me this, I beg of you. He felt his brain click, and he opened his eyes to see that his HUD thing was now showing a display box with two options that he couldn't understand, but suspected was yes and no. Because what else would it fucking be if not that? A bomb? He thought about it. Yeah, probably. His eyes flickered between both options, considering the possibility of accidentally killing himself and not the potential badassery as a result, though. Fuck it. Yes? The display chirped in his mind before vanishing. Though Julian wasn't left in suspense for long, a sudden whir shot a beam of light that traveled through the motorcycle for a few seconds before also disappearing. In the next instant, he felt his body shift and contort in a familiar way. In mere seconds, he was the exact replica of the motorcycle. A quick scan showed he regained his tires, and he howled with joy because finally! Fuck yes! Julian cheered, revving his new engine. Thank you, Terminator God! And Julian could almost imagine the Terminator God giving him a double thumbs up, as if saying, hey, no problem, cuz. Sadly, he had no radio, but he could always steal from a car now that he knew more or less what to do. But for now, he was going to drive around and figure out how to turn into a car again. A thought suddenly occurred to him, and he moved one of his mirrors so he could look at the very much vacant seat. This is going to be an issue. The solution, as it turned out, was to rely on California's most abundant resource: crackheads. All Julian needed to do was ride up to one of the screaming obscenities at the fire hydrant, and upon seeing the riderless motorcycle, the guy immediately hopped on to try and take off. Keyword, tried. Julian cackled as he rode through the streets at a neck-breaking speed, while the crackhead screamed hysterically from his place on top of him, kept in place by the makeshift metal seatbelt that Julian made by accident when the crackhead tried to make a run for it. Parts of his body detached, clumped together in a rope-like mass around the guy, who shrieked in terror at the unexpected restraint upon his person. Terminator bodies are sick as hell, Julian thought gleefully. I don't want to die. I've got too much to live for, the crackhead sobbed. I promise you, God, I don't ever do those drugs again. Don't be such a baby, Julian told the guy, who screamed louder in response. I'm just going to borrow you for a bit and find more armor so I can go back to being a car. At least I hope that's how it works. Oh Lord, it's the fucking devil, eh? The crackhead shrieked. I don't want to go to hell. Julian swerved into a new lane, and the sound of furious honking behind him, he said to the crackhead, Hey, if you flip the guy off behind us, I won't drag you to hell. With wide, fearful eyes, the crackhead turned and flipped the car off behind him, tears streaming down his face. Aha, got him. By the time Julian made it to the dealership, the crackhead had long been arrested by the police on the grounds of driving while intoxicated. Julian had managed to slowly wheel away as the police officers tried to get the hysterical man to calm down. We ain't gonna hurt you, man, he heard one of the officers tell the crackhead gently, his partner nodding empathetically at the side. We just want to help you, all right? The crackhead, meanwhile, had been desperately trying to crawl into the back of the police cruiser. I fucking know that. Take me away from the shit before the devil tries to take me again. At this point, Julian had revved his engine and took off, cheerfully ignoring the shouting behind him when the officers realized that the motorcycle had gone rogue. Anyway, Julian peered around the empty dealership, and soon his eyes landed on a shiny blue Honda. Perfect. He glanced over at the passed-out clerk on the nearby counter and slowly drove over to where the Honda was being displayed. He squinted at the car expectantly. I want to turn into this. Nothing happened. Fucking hell, not again, Julian sighed, only the jolt when his heartburn, which apparently hadn't actually gone away, reared its head, and he suddenly felt himself get forcefully turned back into a Terminator. Huh? The clerk snorted behind him but remained asleep. He startled when his chest, unprompted, began to open up all on its own, and he could faintly make out the glimmer of light from within. But he was distracted from the sight when his chest shot out a bright beam of searing blue light at the Honda, before stopping, his chest snapping shut immediately after. What the actual fuck? Julian started to say, only to shut up when he noticed the residual light rippling across the Honda, and a moment later, the car began to contort and convulse, and soon enough, Julian stared up at the new Terminator that was standing in front of him, who, in turn, stared right back at him with bright blue eyes.
Creator?
She crooned, her head tilting to the side inquisitively. Her eyes flashed for a second before they squinted down at him joyfully.
Creator.
Ah, shit, Julian said numbly. Does this mean I'm a single dad now? And I didn't even get laid. What the shit?
Status report?
His new child asked. Julian said, and if he could sweat, he felt like he would be drenched in gallons of the stuff. Right, what did he tell Metatron his name again? Klikbait. And, you and me are on Earth. We're Terminators. And your name is... Julian drew a blank. Oh god, what do I name my kid? Giftbait, he said lamely. The newly named Giftbait nodded enthusiastically.
I am Giftbait.
She said tearfully.
Hello, Creator Klickbait.
Hi, Julian responded back, frantically wondering how much of a dick move it would be to ditch his kid. And then he had an idea. Hey, Giftbait, he said, shuddering as she loomed over him. I've got a really important task for you.
Yes, Creator Klickbait.
Her eyes brightened. You will keep out of sight of those guys, Julian pointed at the snoring clerk, and you will live in hiding basically forever until you find another Terminator like us. I'd stay with you, but I got my own mission. Yeah. Giftbait, not knowing any better, nodded happily.
Yes, Creator Klickbait.
And then she turned and walked out of the dealership, where Julian watched her turn into a Honda and drive off into the distance. Responsibility successfully avoided, Julian said, pumping his fist. He looked down at his chest and glared at it. And you! The self-satisfied air that had been pulsing around his chest suddenly vanished, taking the heartburn with it. But Julian knew that fucking thing was still there. He scowled. I swear to fucking God, you better not make me have more kids. He jabbed a claw at his panel. You better fucking not. His chest did not respond in any noticeable way, but Julian felt himself slump in resignation. God damn it. Chapter 5. Julian plays with fire and kills a guy by accident. Julian put his new baby-making skills out of his mind when he realized that no matter what he tried, or how many days he waited, he was still unable to turn back into a fucking car. Unbelievable. He flopped onto the dirt and dragged a hand over his face with a muffled groan, and squinted up at the starry night sky. One of the stars was glittering rather brightly, and he couldn't help but watch it for a few minutes as it grew closer and closer, and "Oh, fuck me!" he shouted, immediately began to run, stumbling for a moment before turning into a motorcycle, his wheels screaming as he pushed himself as hard as he could in order to put some distance between himself and the fucking meteor that was heading right at him. Thankfully, he was far enough away that when the massive meteor hit, he avoided getting absolutely obliterated, but he was still sent flying forward with a yelp from the aftershocks of slamming into the earth. He rolled for a moment, his body instinctively turning back into a Terminator form to avoid serious damage, until he smacked into the side of the abandoned shack where he crashed through the rotting wood wall and laid there in a heap on the floor. His HUD began to flash yellow warnings, and he wheezed, "Oh, no red? That's a first." Julian forced himself to sit up, throwing the planks of wood that had fallen onto him with a few muttered curses, and went to stand up only for something in his leg to spark, and then he was watching as the shack burned down around him. Oops. Impulsively, he reached out to stick his hand into the fire, and let out a little manic giggle when he realized that the heat didn't bother him at all. In fact, the fire seemed to crawl up his arm harmlessly, slowly turning from orange and red to blue and green. "Oh, this is dope! I didn't know I could do that!" Julian said excitedly. He knew he could both breathe and set himself on fire, but whatever this was made his brain light up with endless possibilities. Look out, world, he thought with a wide grin. A new art sonus has been born. He sat there, continuing to play with the colorful flames, unaware of the massive form that was lumbering out of the crater a few miles away, or the way it turned into a semi-truck before driving off. "Man," Julian said happily, wiggling his soot-covered fingers, "I can't wait to blow shit up." He really couldn't wait. Julian was hunkered down, bent over a pilfered fuel tank as he carefully coated a long wire in gasoline, which he tied off around in the mouth of the container. He dipped his finger into the liquid and stuck out his robot tongue as he drew a smiley face onto the outside of the tank, serving as an alternate fuse path if the wire failed. But it would also be really fun to watch the smiley face explode. At this thought, he grabbed a fistful of dirt and scattered it over the smiley face, grinning at the now dirt-encrusted gasoline doodles. And done, he chirped, sitting on his haunches to admire his work of art. He looked around and frowned. Now, where to test it? His eyes scanned the area, zooming in on a distant boulder. Ah, perfect. He hauled himself up and swung the fuel tank onto his back with the wire, and chuckled when he realized it probably looked like some kind of Terminator Santa Claus. And as he walked over to the boulder, he couldn't help but say, "Ho, ho, ho, you better watch out, and you better not fucking cry, because if you do, you'll fucking die." And he burst into cackles, the tank jumping on his back at the motions. Julian slammed the tank down at the base of the boulder and began to walk backwards, the coated wire sliding from between his fingers and the neat line on the ground until he was a survivable distance away. He leaned on with a hum and slid his claws across the ground before trailing them up to his chest, where he scraped them against the metal there. The sparks caught on the residue on his fingers, and he watched as green flames burst to life with glee. He reached over to the end of the wire and was about to crook his claw over it in order to transfer the flames when he heard a quiet chittering from behind him. "The hell is that noise?" Julian muttered, turning to look around. He met with the same old dusty road, desert landscape, and lack of life. He clicked his tongue and turned back, only to startle at the sight of a teeny tiny robot dude who squinted up at him with 4 blue glowing eyes. "Holy shit, where did you come from?" "Did you do this?" Julian thought as he narrowed his eyes down at his chest. "No, couldn't have. You didn't have the pew-pew thing." The robot dude suddenly let out a series of clicks and unintelligible noises before scrambling up Julian's legs, seemingly on a fucking mission. Julian stared down at it in bewilderment as it hovered over his chest. It let out a sudden "Doink" and began to scratch the armor there before smacking his head against it in frustration. "You good, bro?" Julian asked as he plucked the robot off his chest, forgetting about the flames. Whoosh! "Oh shit," Julian said when the fire completely engulfed the other robot into a sparking mess of blue and greens as the robot in question began to screech in agony before exploding in a shower of metal pieces that clicked onto the ground below. Julian slowly and awkwardly shuffled the robot's remains into his chest, also forgetting about his baby-making oven thing, until he felt something start to rattle around in there for a few seconds later, and he popped it open with twitching eyes, and was met with a pair of yellow eyes that blinked slowly up at him. "Crap!" the tiny transformer growled. "Creator?" "Fucking hell, again?" Julian hissed, snatching up his newest child to dangle upside down in front of his face. "Why wasn't one kid enough for you?" He aimed his question at his chest, and he swore he could feel it smirking smugly at him. He sighed and looked at his child, who was gnawing at his fingers while purring happily. "Well, shit, I guess I gotta give you a name too, huh?" The tiny face swiveled around to blink at him. "Designation?" "I'm gonna call you..." Julian considered it for a moment, before shrugging. Your name is gonna be Boombait." Boombait screeched happily. Julian let out a miserable sigh. After sending Boombait on his own mission, Julian packed up his DIY bomb into his hiding place for later use, and figured he might as well start traveling again, especially if random little robot dudes were going to pop in and explode on him. So he made sure to mark his location when he inevitably needed to come back and grab the bomb. "Seriously, fuck that guy," he grumbled as he pulled the extra gas canister from his chest. He tore off the cap with his teeth and slurped up the gasoline. "Ruining my fun, making me have another kid. God, exploding was too good for him." Finishing, he threw the canister into the ravine and pulled up his HUD. "Now, where should I go?" His vision lit up with a map of his location, and he scanned it for a minute before zooming in on a random area. His eyes flickered up to take the English text, Santa Monica. "Santa Monica, huh?" Julian hummed, before he drew a path of his current location to where his brain was choosing to go. "Well, at least it's not Los Angeles. All right, to Santa Monica I go." He shifted into his motorcycle form and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. And he never noticed the police cruiser that was tucked out of sight atop a nearby cliff face. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you guys tune in next time to see what happens with Julian and his children, and maybe he finds someone else.